There is something very fishy with a treaty that was signed by the MAJEERTEEN and the Italians in 1889. Now, this is the treaty that, of course, made the MAJEERTEEN part of what came to be known as the Italian Protectorate. I was reading this treaty, and it's very interesting. It's very fishy, actually, and we are going to read it, and you're going to see what I mean by saying it is fishy. Now, this article, of course, is in the book that I'm reading currently, and the book is titled The Treaties of the Lands of the Somalis, and these are treaties that were signed between 1840 and 1950s. So these are treaties. There are very many treaties, actually. There are about 44 treaties. These are major treaties that actually shaped what has become the lands of the Somalis today, and by that I mean Somalia, and of course the Northern Frontier District, and the Ogaden region, and Djibouti. You get what I mean. This book is available on Amazon, and you can check the description box and the pinned comment if you are watching on YouTube for the link. And if you are watching on TikTok, check my profile bio and you will get a link there that will take you to where you can get a copy. Now, before I read the treaty between the MAJEERTEEN and the Italians, I need to clarify something from the video that I did yesterday, or I published yesterday. And that is about the treaties that the British signed with the different clans of what came to be known as the British Somaliland. Now, in that video, I made the argument that when you read these treaties, it is almost not very clear that they were meant to establish a protectorate or even a colony. They seem like they were signed to establish a relationship between the different, we could call them commonwealths, that existed in what came to be known as British Somaliland with the British. They were basically state-to-state kind of agreements about sharing some things and giving the British some rights and things like that. But of course, then later on, they were used as the basis to establish the protectorate, or we can even say a colony. Now, in that video, I say that all the treaties were more or less the same, and I mean the treaty with the Isa, the treaty with the Toljaala, the treaty with the Abre Hawal, all those. But there is one that is very different, and I left a note in the video actually saying that. And this is the treaty that the British signed with the Warsangalis. Of course, there was another clan that never signed a treaty, and that is the Dolbahanta. Now, the Warsangali, the treaty they signed, we could say that this is the one that is very close to actually like saying that, yeah, this is going to be a protectorate. And I'm left wondering whether this is a treaty that the British used to claim that the entire land was a protectorate, because this one actually reads like it's establishing a protectorate, not a colony, but a protectorate. And this was signed on the 27th January 1886 at Bundergori. And of course, the parties are the United Kingdom and the Warsangali. And this is what it says. The British government and the elders of the Warsangali tribe who have signed this agreement, being desirous of maintaining and strengthening the relationship of peace and friendship with existing between them. Now, even this introduction is different from the others, because this talks about strengthening relationships and peace and all that. The others talk about desiring to maintain independence. That's different, actually. Now, let's read the articles. Article 1 reads, the British government, in compliance with the wish of the undersigned elders of the Warsangali, undertakes to extend to them and to the territories under their authorities and jurisdictions the gracious favor and protection of Her Majesties the Queen Empress. Now, of course, very clearly states that they were seeking protection. Article 2 says, the said elders of the Warsangali agree and promise to refrain from entering into any correspondence, agreement, or treaty. Now, this is an article that is similar to the ones found in the other treaties. Now, Article 3, the Warsangali are bound to render assistance to any vessel, whether British or belonging to any other nation, that may be wrecked on the shores. Now, this is also more or less similar with the other article, with the articles in the other treaties. Now, the fourth article is different, because this one talks about slave trading. This article seems to suggest that the Warsangali were offering to help stop the slave trading that was happening along the Indian Ocean, of course. Now, the fifth article, now this one makes it clear also that it's a protectorate. It says the British government shall have the power to appoint an agent or agents to reside in the territories of the Warsangali, and every such agent shall be treated with respect and consideration, and should be entitled to have for this protection such guards as the British government deems sufficient. Now, the treaty calls them agents, but they were going to be administrators, and they became administrators anyways. And the sixth, the Warsangali hereby engage to assist all the British officers in the execution of such duties as may be assigned to them, and further to act upon their advice in matters relating to the administration of justice, the development of resources of the country, the interest of commerce, or in any other matter in relation to peace, order, and good government, and the general progress of civilization. Then it was signed, there is one more article, but I'm not going to read that one. It's signed by F.M. Hunter, witness, Frontier Commander RNN, Mohammed Mahmoud Ali Gerard of the Warsankali, Jama Mahmoud Gerard, Mohammed Ibrahim Dito, Omar Ahmed Dito, Mahmoud Abdullah, Yusuf Mahmoud, Nur Abdullah, Isan Adan, Mohammed Ali Shirwa, Abdi Nur. Those are the people who signed on behalf of the Warsangali. Now, of all the treaties, and there are like 4 or 5 treaties that the British signed with the different clans of the Somalis. This one is the one that clearly, or makes it very clear, that it was about a protectorate. The others are not, and we read those ones in the previous video. Now let's come to the MAJEERTEEN Treaty. This one, of course, was signed with the Italians. Now the MAJEERTEEN, there is also another one that was signed with the Obia or Obio Sultanate. And this one was signed on the 2nd March of 1889. I'm not going to read that one, but it's very interesting. When you get this book, you should read both of them, the Obio Treaty and the MAJEERTEEN Treaty, and then you'll see what game the Italians were playing. It's a very interesting one. We are going to read the MAJEERTEEN one because it's very fishy actually. When you first start reading it, it just seems like any other treaty, but then you go further down and you realize there's something that is not adding up. Now let's read and see. Now this treaty was signed on the 7th April 1889 at Bandar Alula. Parties Italy and Sultan Osman Mahmud Yusuf of the MAJEERTEEN. And this is a translation, of course. We need to bear that in mind. It was not initially written in English. It was written in Italian, I guess, and maybe a copy in Arabic. And this is how it reads. It reads, on this 16th day of the month of Shaban, 1306 Islamic calendar, corresponding to the 7th day of April 1889, we, Sultan Osman Mahmud Yusuf, Sultan of all the MAJEERTEEN, of our own free will, put this act our hand and seal. We have placed our country and all our possessions from Ras Awad to Ras Alekile, Wadi Nogal being the farthest limit, under the protection and government of His Majesty Umberto I, King of Italy. At this time, Italy was still a monarch. And this we have done through the representatives of His Majesty the King, vis-a-vis V. Villonardi, Italian consul at Zanzibar, Captain Amoretti, commanding His Majesty's ship Rapido, and Captain Poselli, commanding His Majesty's ship Staff Eta. We have agreed that the Italian flag shall be hoisted in the countries above mentioned. We declare that we will not make treaties or contracts with any other government or persons. Now, they are saying that Yusuf promised that he was not going to make any treaties with other European powers, of course, like the British. We declare that besides that, we will prevent, as far as we are able, all unjust acts directed against Italian subjects and their friends in all our possessions. We have signed this act of our own free will and full of understanding, and this which we have signed will remain binding upon us, our heirs, brothers, subjects, and their descendants. So, when they were signing this treaty, of course, the assumption was that it was going to continue binding maybe forever, maybe even in 2026. It was supposed to be in effect, but of course, some things changed in history, of course, and Somalia gained independence. Or the Italians were pushed out at some point, and then Somalia gained independence. We append our signature and seals to this act in the full possession of our faculties of mind and body. Very important. Given at Bandar Alula, this 6th day of the month of Shaban, 1306, 7th April 1889. Now, the people who signed, of course, Osman Mahmud Yusuf, Sultan of the MAJEERTEEN, alias Yusuf Ali Yusuf, Sultan of Opia, was present. Very important, actually, because the Italians were playing these two. V. Villonardi, His Italian Majesty's Consul, Carlo Amoretti, Captain of Frigate, Giuseppe Poselli, Captain of Frigate. Now, there is a note that was left behind by the person who compiled these treaties, And these treaties were compiled, used to be compiled in what was known as Map of Africa by Treaty. And this is a very interesting and valuable and useful document that was generated by one Sir E. Hartzlet. And he generated several volumes. I think the last one could have been generated maybe 1910. Very useful, actually. I went through the three editions. Very, very, very useful. And he leaves behind a note about this specific treaty. And this is what he writes. The Sultan of the MAJEERTEEN declared his adhesion to the Brussels Act of 1890 by declaration dated 16 November 1894 and confirmed by declaration 7 April 1895. Of course, these dates are later on. These are dates like several years later on after this treaty was signed. The treaty was signed in 1889, but then the Yusuf issues declarations accepting this in 1890 and 1895. But there's something that happened there. This note continues to say, in consequence of the refusal of the Sultan Osman Mahmud to recognize his dependence on the Italian government, and in view of his failure to keep his solemn assurance, the Italian government, by convention signed at the Bandar Qasim on 10 April 1901, made over to Yusuf Ali Sultan of Obia the provisional administration and custody of the MAJEERTEEN ports of Bandar Alula, Bandar Viluk, and Bandar Qasim. Now, here is the game being played here. After Yusuf signed this treaty in 1889, seems like he had a change of mind. Probably he realized that this was not a good treaty. There was something wrong with this treaty. And this is a game that the Italians played all over. And that's how they ended up fighting with the Ethiopians for a very long time, because they would use these tricks of introducing articles to documents or writing these documents in a way that the other party did not really get it, and then later on using those to claim something that they did not agree. And I think Sultan Osman Mahmud Yusuf realized that there is something wrong with this document, and he was not going to ratify it. And by so doing, of course, the Italians felt wronged, and they started playing some game. And the person to help them is the Sultan of Obio. And they went to the Sultan of Obio and told them, we are going to give you control of all the ports that were for the MAJEERTEEN. And of course, that was meant to scare the MAJEERTEEN Sultan into changing his mind. And seems like it worked, actually. It worked. On the 18th August 1901, however, the Sultan of the MAJEERTEEN signed a fresh convention by which he placed himself, his sultanate, and the whole of the territory of the MAJEERTEEN under the protection of the Italian government. So they used Obio to scare Yusuf. Yusuf signed the treaty. We don't know whether this is the shape that the treaty was, because it's possible the Italians did in MAJEERTEEN land what they did in Ethiopia, where they write an article into the agreement that says something that they did not agree. It's possible that happened here. But then Yusuf later on catches on that there's something wrong with this treaty, and he backs off. He's like, no, we are not going to follow that treaty. The Italians, the only option they have is to threaten him by talking to the Obio Sultanate and telling the Obio Sultan that we are giving you control of the ports that were ports of the MAJEERTEEN, of course. And that scared Yusuf. Yusuf was scared enough that he came back in 1901 and he accepted the terms of the treaty that he had signed previously. I found this to be very, very interesting. Now, this book is full of treaties that have these shenanigans, so we could say. And I think this is something that happened not only in the lands of the Somalis, but across Africa. Treaties were signed that were very weak, actually, but force and threats were used to enforce them and then to establish the colonies that were established later. Now, if you want a copy of this book, as I said, you can get a copy from Amazon. Check the pinned comment or the description box if you are watching on YouTube. And if you are watching on TikTok, just go to my profile bio. There is a link there that will take you to where you can get a copy. At the moment, Amazon, but I'm planning to have it available on Nuria, so you can still check if you are in Kenya or East Africa and you want it from Nuria. I'm going to make those arrangements. Those are my random thoughts.